Do you have any crops that have bolted and went to seed? If so, you may be wondering, first, what caused it, and then second, what to do with those crops. Well, out in my garden right now, I have a lot of cool season crops that have bolted and went to seed. Here in zone 9, it warms up so quickly in the springtime, many of your cool season crops are going to quickly bolt and head to seed. So you can see behind me, I have some really tall daikon radish plants that have just quickly bolted and went to seed. I didn't even really get a chance to harvest many of them. Many of them were still too young, and I was holding off to try to let those daikon radishes get a little bit bigger. And before I knew it, we had a couple warm days, and I came out to the garden and they started to bolt and head to seed. So I just left them, because one great thing about leaving these plants in the garden is that it's really great to attract the beneficial insects. So I have butterflies and bees out here, and I don't need to plant this space yet, so I'm just letting them be. I am enjoying seeing all the pollinators, so I'm letting these daikon radishes stay out in the garden until I need that space for my summer crops. Another thing you can do with the bolted plants is collect the seeds from them. Being that they are an heirloom variety, you can just let these flowers completely mature and finish forming into developed seeds, and then you can save the seeds. Almost all crops almost all of these crops that bolt and head to seed are pretty easy to collect seeds from. You just have to watch, and when those flowers finally mature, you'll be able to shake the seeds into a bag, or you could clip them off and shake them into a bag, whatever's easier. I actually have a video all about saving carrot seeds, which would be another cool season crop that is likely to bolt and head to seed. Carrots actually take a little longer to head to seed, so if you want to watch that entire process, I'll be sure to link to that video in the description. But some other crops that have bolted and went to seed are my broccoli, some of my onions, my Brussels sprouts. I have cilantro that has bolted and went to seed. And anyways, all of them right now, I'm just letting them be out in the garden. They're attracting the pollinators. I'm going to collect seeds from all the crops that I can, and then I can just plant those crops for next year. But because crops bolt and head to seed so quickly in the warm weather, that is why I prefer to not plant my cool season crops in late winter or early spring. I plant my fall garden or my cool season crops in the fall, and whatever I can harvest in the fall and early winter, I will. Everything else will just overwinter, and then come early February usually, that's when I'll be able to harvest a lot of these crops. But once it starts warming up, these crops bolt and head to seed. So I don't typically replant in the spring like many gardeners do that live in colder areas, because they just don't do that good here when the springtime temperatures warm up too quickly. So I save my springtime planting for warm season crops. So once all the danger of frost has passed, then I'll plant my warm season crops. And sometimes I will plant another batch of cool season crops that mature quickly, like lettuce, spinach, radishes, things like that, because you can typically get a harvest pretty quickly, so you can harvest that crop before the plant bolts and heads to seed. But as far as planting things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, I don't plant any of those crops in late winter or early spring here in zone 9, because they just don't do well. These were ones that I had planted over the winter time, and I was hoping I was going to get a harvest, in mid-February or so, but we had a couple random warm days and they bolted and went to seed. So that is that. So if you've been wondering what caused your plants to bolt, it is because when it warms up too quickly, those plants think it's the end of their season and it's their time to reproduce and give seeds for the next season. So I just recommend planting your cool season crops in the fall if you live in a warmer climate, because those crops can just overwinter, and then you can get your harvest in usually January and February. But once the days start getting too warm, especially in later February and early March, usually these crops just don't grow well anymore. So save your springtime planting for your warm season crops if you're in a zone like zone 9 where we have hot summers and mild winters. But in the meantime, if you have your bolted crops in the garden, just let them be and attract some pollinators in, especially if you have the space. If you don't have the space, then cut them down and make room for your summer vegetables. But in the meantime, it's a great way to bring some pollinators into your garden. And bringing lots of beneficial insects into your garden is a really great way to keep your pest problem down for the entire season. And if you'd like to learn more about naturally keeping pests out of your garden, which is a common problem for all gardeners, we all struggle with pests. And if you want to naturally keep them away, I have an entire video podcast right here all about naturally keeping pests out of your garden. So head to that video next and I'll see you there.